Hey Fright fans, Scott from Fright Props here in the Fright Props conference room, which I'm borrowing for this video today, surrounded behind me by over 20 years of Fright Props catalog covers. So I just want to take a second at the start of this video to thank everybody who's watching, everybody who's supported this company over the last 20 plus years. Actually, as of this June, this is my 20th anniversary working with Fright Props, and it's been just the pleasure of my life. And I want to thank everybody who makes it possible for me to wake up every day and get to do something I love. Today's video is going to be one of the most ambitious that I've ever done. So it's going to probably be a lot longer than some of our videos. So if you don't watch the whole thing, no worries there. But I want to cover all the programming that we're going to do for our Servo Skeleton. If you've been watching this series of videos, you've seen that we've installed a bunch of our Servo Kits into this skeleton to create a violin playing skeleton prop. The last step is going to be to actually program and control it. And to do that, we're going to be using a Flex 2 controller with Director. We're going to be using a Director Connect. We're going to be using a ServoDMX to drive the servos, and I actually have a light that I'm going to be using as well, a DMX light. So there's a lot to cover. It's going to be a pretty long video, but I want to cover a lot of these different things. And hopefully, if you're watching, even if you're not doing a project like this, you might pick up some little tips or tricks or inspiration to do something on your own. So first thing we're going to do is step over to the PC. We're going to start with Director, getting that set up, and then we'll go through the whole process, start to finish, of programming the prop. All right, here we go. We are over at the PC now getting set up for this prop. So the first thing we're going to do is open up Director. This is our free program that we're going to be using to program the Flex controller, and via that, the DMX fixtures that we're using, the ServoDMX and the DMX light that we want to control. So the first thing we're going to do is open Director. Again, Director is a free program. And once we have it open, we're going to create a new show. So right here up in the left, we're going to click New. We're going to choose our controller. So for this, I'm using a Flex 2 controller. This is the model here, the most recent model. For the outputs, I'm using an 8 output with DMX. And really what I'm using this for primarily, in fact exclusively right now, is just for this DMX output. We need a DMX controller to output a DMX signal to the devices that we're going to be trying to control. So that's what this is going to be. Then we can go ahead and name the show here. I'm just going to call this Servo Skelly. And we're going to click Create Show. And here it's going to open up. So you can see right now what we have is our Flex controller here. And this is our timeline. If I were to start dragging the recording button here, that would extend our timeline. So here we would have a 30-second show. And here we can control the outputs of the Flex controller. These are solid state outputs. So if we're using a 12-volt power supply, they would output 12 volts. So they could be used to control solenoids or 12-volt lights or pretty much any other low voltage device. But we're not going to be using those. What we're going to be using is DMX fixtures. All right, so the first step here is actually going to be to add our sound. We have a violin playing skeleton, so of course he needs to have a violin sound. I went on a site that I like to use a lot called freesound.org, and it's a place where people just post sounds that you can use, usually without any attribution or anything like that for your projects. And this one did say it's totally free use, no attribution required, so we're going to add that here. You can see also, I should stop and mention where we're at here with our groups. So the Flex has 2 groups because it has 2 trigger inputs. So trigger input 1 is going to trigger group 1, trigger input 2 would trigger group 2, and if we wanted to do an ambient or idle animation, that would go under the idle scene. We're using group 1 here, so that will be for the number 1 trigger input on the controller, so we'll program this and then we can use that trigger input to activate this whole scene. So I'm just going to click here where it says sound to add a sound. I happen to have this on my desktop. So I'm going to go to my desktop, I'm going to browse for the sound I have right here, which is this sad violin sound, and open that. And you'll notice something cool here. So that was a WAV file, and Flexes need MP3 files, and Director knows that. So it's actually prompting me here to convert that WAV file into an MP3. We're going to say yes to that. It's going to go ahead and export the sound and then convert it, and then import it into the show for Director. And then it's going to ask me if I want to make my show length equal, or my scene length rather, equal to the length of the sound. I'm going to say no right now because we're actually going to edit this sound. So this is a pretty long sound. It's over 2 minutes long. And I'm not going to want to try to program the movement of that violin to a 2-minute long song. That's going to be way too complicated. So maybe around a minute we can handle. So what I'm going to do is looking at this sound file here, I can see there's a break right about here in the middle that we could probably cut it off where it's going to go quiet. So I'm going to go here to edit sound, and that's going to bring up this sound editing menu. So what I can do here is actually select the part of the sound that I want to actually use. So I'm going to select this part here, and then I'm just going to hit crop. And so what that's going to do is actually going to crop the sound down to that shorter, more manageable size. And you can see here now that rather than being 2 minutes long here on our timeline, this track ends a little bit shy of a minute. We can then take our recording timeline here and bring that all the way to the end. And one thing I like to do right away is just right click this and click enable fixed length, and then end scene here. So this is just going to tell us that this scene ends here no matter what, so we can't record any longer than that because we never want this scene to be longer than this amount of time. All right, so next up, let's add our DMX devices. So we have 2 of them that we're doing for this project. The first one is going to be our ServoDMX. That's what's actually controlling the servos in our skeleton. So to add a DMX device, in the lower left-hand corner here is the little plus button. We're going to hit plus here, and you can see the ServoDMX right here. We're only using 4 servos, so I'm just going to select 4 servo outputs enabled for this. You can have up to 16 depending on the ServoDMX you have. We're just using 4, so I'm going to select 4 so that we don't have a bunch of extra servo tracks that we're not using built into the program. And I'm going to hit select. I'm not going to do this 16-bit channels or anything like that, and I'm not using any neopixels, so I'm leaving that at 0. This is going to pop up, and this is very important. This is going to tell us the DMX address that we need to set the ServoDMX to. So every DMX device basically has an address. You can think of it like the address of a house. Where does it live on the chain of DMX? So this device is going to be address 5. So we're going to want to set that on the ServoDMX, and we'll show that later. But we want to make sure we remember that. We can always be reminded of it later through Director, but we're going to remember that our ServoDMX needs to be set to 5, and we're going to hit close. So it's going to pop up here with our ServoDMX. Now the next thing we're going to add is another DMX fixture, but it's actually one that doesn't exist in the pre-created library of DMX devices for Director. It's one that we're going to add, and it's called a mini par RGBW LED from Eliminator Lighting. So if you have a DMX device that doesn't exist, you can add it yourself, and it's relatively easy most of the time. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit that same plus button, and I'm going to hit DMX device. Now this opens up the DMX browser. So there's a bunch of included fixtures here, so you can browse through. They do have Eliminator Lighting, but they only have a couple fixtures in here, and neither of them happen to be the one I'm using. So what we're going to do is go to Mine here, and I'm going to click New to add a new device. And now I can actually fill in this information myself. So we know the name of the manufacturer is Eliminator Lighting, and the device name is the Mini Par RGBW LED. And this light happens to have 3 different operating modes. There's a 4 input, a 6 input, and an 8 input mode based on the number of features. So we're just going to use the most simple one. So I'm going to go and label this 4. So now we can start adding the actual features of the light. And to do that, I've actually cropped out a little piece of the manual here. And this is usually included in any DMX fixture. If it's a good fixture, it should have a manual that tells you what all the functions of the DMX inputs are. So we're looking at this 4-channel mode here. And this basically tells us that for channel 1, a range between 0 and 255, these are the values that will be input from the DMX, and that controls the red. So this is going to be like a dimming or amount of red light function. So 0 is going to be off, anywhere up to 255 will be maximum. And so we're going to create a way to control that. So we're going to go here where it says channel 1. We're going to go to name. We're going to call this red. We're going to use line with fill, and this is the most common that you'll be using. There are a bunch of different options here, but typically if you're wanting to represent a value from 0 to 255, you're going to be using line with fill. If you need more info on that, you can always click help here. This will tell you all about all the different types of different inputs that you can have for control. For the value, we're going to make that 255. For the color, we're going to select red, since this is our red light. And we're going to go ahead now and add another one. So the second option here is our green light. So we'll go ahead and name this green. And again, that's going to be a 255. This is the maximum value. And we'll make this one green. Our next value is going to be, if we look at our chart here, our blue. They've misspelled it bool, but hey, that's all right. We can make it bool if we want. We'll put it at blue. So we're going to name that blue. B-L-U-E. Line with fill, 255. And that one is already blue, so we can just leave it like that. And then we have one more, and this one is our white value. So basically these are just the values of each of the individual LEDs that are on the light. And then we'll put this at 255, and I realize I need to go back and make this one 255. And this one, you don't want to make the cursor white because it will be hard to see, so I'm going to make it black, and then go with that. Oops, sorry, I changed the wrong one. So you just double click, change this to blue, and then change this one to black. All right, so this is basically the setup for our light. We can go ahead now and save this device. We could even add a picture of it if we had one here, but I don't currently have that, so I'm just going to click save, and now we can select it. We'll hit select again. It's going to tell us to set the address of this light to number 9, so we're going to want to remember that as well. And you can see here it's actually listed on the side. If you look under the ServoDMX, you can see DMX5, the address right there. So we're just going to click OK, and then look at that. It's going to add it right in here. So here's our values that we can control the light with. So what's cool about this is we could do it by hand here, and we'll do it later for real, but just by drawing in, we can control how much of that red light is on. So when it's full, all the way up to 255, it'll be all the way bright. When it's down at 0, it'll be off. So we can do that for each of the different LEDs on the light itself, creating any pattern that we want. All right, so that's basically the setup that we're going to do here. Everything else we're going to do now, we're going to do with Director, but we're going to connect this to the skeleton. And there's a little bit of prep we want to do on the skeleton, on the ServoDMX and stuff before we actually connect it. So we're going to jump out of Director, we're going to move over to the Servo Skeleton, and we're going to start going through the next steps of the process. All right, so now that we've done the initial setup over on Director, we can start setting up the actual hardware that's going to control the skeleton. And we're going to first start with our ServoDMX. So the ServoDMX is a servo controller that takes a DMX signal and decodes that to servo movements. We have 4 servos we're using here, but you can use up to 16 different servos. So this is a really good controller for super complex servo animatronics. I have it powered up here with the power supply plugged in here. This is a 6-volt power supply. And the first thing we're going to do is actually set our DMX address. You'll remember from the Director portion that we want to set this to 5. So in order to do that, we're going to hold the down button here, it's labeled DN, and tap set. We're going to get a series of blinks here. So the first is a single blue blink, and that is the options menu. So we can tap set here to enter that menu. Then we're going to get a single green blink, and this is for setting our DMX address. So what we're going to do here is then click set again to enter that menu for setting the DMX address. And we're going to get a single orange blink. And that's going to be for actually setting the first digit of your DMX address. DMX addresses can be up to 3 digits long. Ours is only 1, so we're just going to go to 5, which is our only digit. We're going to hit down to enter that, and then we're just going to wait. The ServoDMX will time out, it'll set the address to 5, and then kick us back to the initial menu. All right, so now we're back at that set DMX address, and we can actually now just kind of page down through the other options that we're not going to be using until we get to this red light, and then hit set here. Now we'll get back to the previous menu above that one. So this is the options menu. We can page through this till we get a red light, and then hit set again. And now we're back to normal operation. You'll see we have a red light here because we have no DMX signal currently, but we will in a little bit. You can actually now, though, start to use the knob here to check out the servo movements. So the next thing we're going to want to do is actually set the limits for each servo. So to do that, we're just going to go to the servos by using our down and up button here to kind of cycle through the different servos. So we're going to start here at 1. I'm going to hold down set for 2 seconds. So you can see this column here has some indications next to it. So this first setting is our low limit on our first servo. So by moving the dial here, I can actually set where that low limit's going to be. So I want that to be here at the end of the bow stroke. And once I get it into the position I like, I'll just hit down. Now we're going to set the high limit. So we want to set that probably right about there. This is center position, so you can adjust where the center of the servo is. We're just going to leave it right there. And then this is the option for the servo. So you can have it either sleep or not. I'm going to have it set to not sleep. All right, once we've chosen those options, we can hit set again. That'll bring us back now to normal operation. And there's one more thing we need to do. We want to set the acceleration of the servo and the speed. To do that, we just have servo number 1 selected here, and we just tap set. So it's going to start moving between the 2 limits of the servo. Now this first setting is actually the acceleration. So this is basically how much ramping there's going to be as it accelerates from the start speed to the maximum speed. So we'll set this to somewhere right here in the middle. What we're looking to do is try to balance it out and make the movement smooth. So the first setting is acceleration, the setting is speed. And with a combination of those two things, you should be able to get a nice smooth servo movement. So we're going to go right about there for this, and then the next indication here, we're now looking at the right side of this menu, is speed, and we'll just set that all the way up because we do want the servo to be able to move as fast as it can for this bow thing, because we might have a couple moments where we want that bow to kind of jiggle back and forth pretty quick. Once I'm done there, I'll just click set again, and we're back to the main menu here essentially. So we can now test our servo. Looks pretty good, and we can go ahead and set the limits for the other servos. So again, to do that, I'm just going to use the buttons here to navigate. So here's servo 2. I'll hold down set for 2 seconds. This is our head up and down. So I'm going to start with the lower limit here. Start with the up limit. I don't want them to look too far up. I don't want them like staring at the sky. So I'll go right about there. Center position, we'll leave right about where it is. And then option, we'll go with 1, and we'll hit set to save. Then let's go ahead and check the speed on that one as well. So we'll just tap set. That's too fast. So I'm gonna go, or sorry, I should say the acceleration first, of course. So yeah, you'll see if we go here, there's like basically no ramping. It's just boom, boom, boom. As I slow this down, it's a little hard to notice with this short servo movement, but there's a little bit of more smoothness transitioning from that stopped to full speed. So let's go ahead and go with that, and then we'll set the servo speed. So here we can actually, if we want, even fine tune this more to make it very slow. We can make it a little bit faster. I think we'll just set it right about here. And we'll hit set again to save. All right, next servo should be our head turn. This is number 3. Hold down set for 2 seconds. We'll do our lower limit here, which will be to our left, and our high limit, which will be our right turn. Center position, just keep that about where it is. And then option we'll leave at 1. All right, we'll go ahead and set the speed and acceleration for that. Just tap set. So this one, right now, we need to up our speed a little bit. So I'm gonna go down and up our speed. So you can see like that the initial setting is essentially how fast the servo can move. We don't need it to move that fast. So let's say right about here, and then I'm gonna go back up and set that acceleration. So again, I can set this all the way up if I want it to be kind of more jerky. You see how it's just stopping? It's not smoothly rotating, or set it somewhere kind of in the middle to get a little bit more smooth motion. That looks pretty good to me. And then we'll tap set again to save. All right, the last servo is our waist turn. So we're gonna go up to servo 4, hold set for 2 seconds, and we'll set our limits here. So we'll set our lower limit right about there. And this one, we're gonna wanna set that servo acceleration and speed to be pretty low because we don't want it to whip back and forth like crazy. So I'm gonna set that as the left limit, and we'll set that as the right. Center right there in the middle. Option 1, hit set, and then let's set our speed. And this is gonna be slower, again, our acceleration first. I want this to be nice and gradual, so I'm gonna set this all the way down to 1. There, look at that, so nice and smooth and slow. And then our speed, I think that's actually working pretty darn good, so I'm just gonna leave it right there and hit set again to save. All right, so that is the basic setup for the ServoDMX. We set the address, we set the limit and the speed and acceleration for each of the servos. Now we can start connecting this to the Flex, which is gonna be our DMX output on the controller side, and start actually controlling the movements of the prop. So here we have our Flex 2 controller. So this is actually what's gonna be sending those DMX signals to our ServoDMX and our light when we attach that to actually control what happens with those. So the first thing I'm gonna do is actually run my DMX. So you can see that there are 3 Ethernet terminals here on the controller. The top one is for programming. We're gonna use that later to interface with our PC to do the programming. The second one is a DMX in, and the third one here is DMX out. So we're going to start there. I just have a standard Cat5 Ethernet cable here. I'm going to plug that into DMX out. The ServoDMX has DMX in and out as well, so I'm going to take the other end of the cable from the DMX out of the Flex and plug that into the DMX in here on the ServoDMX. You can see the status light now flashing green because the Flex is on. I've already done some pre-programming there, so it's already receiving now a DMX signal. Now, since we want to add a light to this as well, we're going to actually use our DMX out here to go from the ServoDMX to the light. So I'm just going to put another Cat5 cable here on the DMX out, and then I'm going to interface that with the light at the end of my chain. You can think of DMX almost like a subway train or something like that, and the addresses are the stops. So the first stop, once the DMX leaves the controller, is going to be here at station number 5 for the ServoDMX. And the addresses are basically how many things are happening at that station. So the next station in line is going to be number 9 because we have 4 outputs here on our ServoDMX. So we have our light that we already entered in director, and that's going to be set to address 9. So the DMX will come in, stop here at station 5, do whatever it needs to do, and then it's going to leave and head to the next station down the line. So let's plug in our Ethernet cable to DMX out here. So I just have another Ethernet cable. I'm going to the DMX out on the controller here. All right, so here's the light that we're going to be using. Again, this is that Eliminator Mini Par RGBW LED. And here is the other end of that Ethernet cable. Now, if you look at the back here, of course, you can see that this is not going to interface with the DMX pinouts here on the light. For that, we have a special adapter. So this has the 3 pins on one side here, female, to go into the DMX in on the light here. Then it has that RJ45 connector on the other side for the Ethernet cable. So we can just plug that in here. Now, there's a couple more things that we need to actually do on the light itself. You can see here, it'll probably be hard to read, but there's a menu button here. And this lets us move through the menus on the light itself. So there's some presets that you can go through here, but we want to go to this one, ADDR for address. Now, what we want to do next is hit enter, and we can change our address. So you see I've already set it to 9, which is what we want to set it to, but this is where you would do that. So you just move up and down here until you get to 9, you hit enter, and this is where we select the channel modes. So remember where we had the 4, the 6, and the 8 channel modes? We're going to be using the 4 channel mode, but if you wanted to use the 8 or the 6, you can find those here as well, and we'll just hit enter there. All right, so that is the light actually now connected to our DMX chain. So the DMX is going to leave the controller, it's going to pass through the ServoDMX, and here to the light at the end of our chain. All right, so here we are set up to start actually programming the skeleton. So I have Director open on my laptop here. The Flex is here. I have a speaker plugged into the Flex, and then the light is here. So again, that DMX is coming from the Flex here, heading up to the ServoDMX for the skeleton, then back down and into the light here. Now, let's take a look at Director. This is where we're actually going to be doing all the programming. So from earlier, you'll remember we have our audio file here. These are the outputs of the Flex, which we're not going to be using for this, but we could add different effects. There's all sorts of stuff you can do with those. Again, they can easily control low voltage stuff. You can add relays to control high voltage components, so very useful if you have other effects you want to add to your show. And here, I've actually gone through and labeled the 4 servos that we're going to be controlling with the ServoDMX. So Servo 1 is our bow, Servo 2 is our head up, Servo 3 is our head turn, and Servo 4 is our waist turn. If we scroll down more, we'll see our Mini Par RGBW LED here, the 4 channels, so with our red, green, blue, and white. So the next step is how do we actually get this to interface with the Flex controller, and that is where the Director Connect comes in. This is basically a module that allows for real-time control from the Director running on our PC here to the Flex controller. So I have that hooked to the PC here with this USB cable. I'm going to take another Ethernet cable and plug that in here where it says BooBox. And then I'm going to take the other end here and put it into the programming terminal here on the Flex. What that's going to do is it's going to essentially link these things together. It's going to allow me to control the Flex from Director, so we can set that aside for now. In order for that to work, we need to hit this little button here. This is the Director Connect button, so we click that. It's going to connect, and you can see right away that the servo is going to respond, so now everything is all hooked together. So again, you can see here in Director that we have all our outputs for the Flex. We're not gonna be using those. These are the solid state outputs. You can turn them off and on your timeline just by clicking in the space here. Blue means on, white means off. So you can create a pattern of your solid state outputs. Again, those could be wired to relays to control high voltage, or they can be used directly to control low voltage. So lots of flexibility there if you wanted to add some solenoids or some 12-volt lights to flicker, or whatever you might come up with. But we're going to be starting with our servos. So here we have our ServoDMX. You can see that I have labeled the servos. Servo 1 is our bow, Servo 2 is our head up, Servo 3 is our head turn, and Servo 4 is our waist turn. We're going to leave the bow for last because that's kind of the most specialty of the different programs. It's the one that we want to try to sync to the audio, and there's a couple little tricks we can do to try to make that work. We're not going to get it exactly right. We could probably spend a whole lifetime trying to sync it up. We could learn the song and basically, play along with it, but I have a little trick that's going to get us pretty close without too much of a headache. So we're going to start with the servos here. We'll start with head up, and how do we control those? Now we could just click and draw a wave file. If we go back and hit play, we'll actually see this happen on the skeleton itself. So you can see there, it's just mimicking the waveform that I've drawn. You can hear our audio playing back as well. But that's kind of a pain in the butt, and it isn't very accurate. So what I like to do, and maybe this is just because I'm a gamer myself, is actually use a gamepad. This is just a Logitech generic gamepad. I have it plugged in via USB to the computer. And what I can do is actually go here where it has a little controller icon, and I can click connect. And it's going to bring up this gaming pad profile here. So what we're going to do is we're going to add a new profile. We're going to click plus. So now I can go here and click add mapping. We're going to go ahead and now open this. This is the control menu here, and this is where we have all the different outputs of the controller. So our first movement, servo number 2, is our head up and down servo, and I'm going to want to use this stick here, up and down, to control that. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click right stick Y axis, so that's the up and down axis. I'm going to then map that to servo 2 head up, and then I'll click OK. Now we can actually test that just by moving the stick. So you can see by moving the stick up and down, I'm able to move the head up and down. So let's add our other maps as well. So we're going to click add map. So we can click control here. We're going to go right stick X, and we're going to map that to servo 3. That's our head turn. And we're going to click OK. So now you can see we actually have pretty full control. I can move the head left and right. I can move the head up and down. Let's go ahead and add the mapping now for the waist turn. For that, I'm going to use the left stick here, and I'm going to use the X axis, so the left and right axis here. I'm just going to click that. I'm going to map that to servo 4 waist turn. You can see now that I can actually rotate the character left and right. It's slow because we have that servo speed and acceleration turned down. Yeah. But that's good, that's what we want. So now look at, I can actually puppet the prop in real time, which is kind of cool. And that's what we're going to do to actually record the motions of the prop. So now we can hit OK. The elbow servo I'm not going to map. You could map that if you wanted to do some live puppeteering. Maybe I'll demo that quick. So let's go ahead and add a map. We'll go for the left trigger here. And let's map that to servo 1 for the bow and hit OK. So now you can see that if I were to click this button, I can actually move the bow. So if you wanted to do something more simple, you could just use this to record, whatever movement you wanted to on the bow there. We're going to go back to the start of our show. And one thing to note here is that if these little indicators here are red, that means it's going to record once I start recording. So right now, I don't have anything recorded that I want to save. So everything's red, that's good. What we're going to do is I'm going to first do my head motion. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to click record. It's going to pop up this little dialog kind of letting me know about the controls I have here on the actual laptop. So what I can do is actually just hit the space bar when I'm ready to control it. I'll just hit close here. You can see now that the red light is blinking here. I'm going to hit the space bar and start programming. The program will automatically stop recording when we hit the end there because we have that fixed length set at the end of the show. All right, so we can always go back and re-record that if we want to change anything. If we like what we have, we can just go over here and click these to turn them green and basically write protect them. So now these movements will not be stomped over when we go to record again. So now we can go ahead and move back to the beginning, hit the record button, dismiss this again. You can always disable this popping up if you already know the deal. Now we're gonna hit the spacebar to start recording and do our waist turn. If you look at the director program there, you'll see that it's actually writing the waveform or the output for the servo there. All right, now we can go ahead and lock that in by turning this green here. And we're ready now to conquer our servo bow movement. So as I said before, there's different tricks you can do. So I could puppet this in real time, but it's gonna be a real nightmare to try to sync it up. I'm not that good a musician. So what I'm gonna do is actually select this here, and then I'm gonna go to effects here at the top. There's a number of different effects that you can apply, and one of them that I've found works well is this speech spotlight effect. So I first started trying the speech sync effect here, which is what you would use for like a talking skull, like the jaw movement on a talking skull. And I found that that didn't actually work all that well for this example because I want some pretty high peaks and valleys. I want that bow to move all the way back and forth. So this speech spotlight effect ended up working pretty well. So once I click that, it's gonna open up here and it's gonna show me some options here. So basically by adjusting these, we can create a dynamically generated series of movements. So these two are the hold time and the on threshold. Here we have the off value, which I want to be all the way down, and the on value to be all the way up. I also want to adjust this fade time here. See how that's gonna kind of create these sort of peaks, these diamond-shaped peaks. That's what I'm looking for. And basically we can kind of adjust these as we want, and we can hit live preview to see how it's syncing up. So you can see there that we need a little bit more. There's some moments where the bow's not moving at all. So let's go ahead and end the live preview, head back to the start, and let's do some adjusting here. So I'm gonna move this threshold actually down. Basically just looking for what's giving me what looks like a pretty good pattern here matched up to the wave file, the audio above. So that looks pretty good there. Let's decrease the hold time here. All right, that actually looks pretty good. Let's preview that. And I think that's looking pretty good actually. So again, you can play with this as much as you want. You can try to get it to sync more exactly to the audio, or you could go in and you can live program it, whatever actually works for your scenario. So I'm gonna click OK to end that. So one thing I noticed when I was testing is these areas where it's kind of an extended position of the bow. So all this 2255 value right here, that's just gonna be the bow kind of stuck at its last point. I went ahead and rounded these off just a little bit manually. So I just kind of click and drag from the top in a little arcing motion down to connect. So just rounding it off a little bit. For me, I thought that helped. All right, so let's go ahead and lock that in. And we've basically now created our animation. If we want to preview it, we can just hit this to go back to start and hit play and see how it looks. All right, I think that's actually looking pretty good. So let's go ahead and add some lighting. So if we scroll down here to our light, we can actually see that we have our different functions of the light. We have our red, green, blue, and white. Now all we do to control the light is just click and drag patterns. So when I set this up initially, I did enter 255 as a value. That's actually just the starting value. So if you remember there, these were all filled and I was sort of taking away. So when I re-entered this for the demo here, I actually just started at 0. So they're all empty now. But if I click and drag, it's going to create basically turning the red light on and off. If I move the play line, you'll actually see the light start to mimic the functions of this line form here. You can add in the other colors as well, and you can just hand draw these in. You can also use an attachment that has a slider on it, or you can use the game controller to do this as well. You can see here now that we have sort of mixing colors, fading up and down. What I want to do is actually want to transition from red to green to blue over the course of the animation. So let's go ahead and clear these out. I'm just clicking and dragging down below the line there to clear those out. So let's start with our red. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to hand draw a peak and a valley of red. Then I'm going to hand draw a peak and a valley of green. And lastly, I'm going to do a peak and a valley of blue. Don't worry if these look kind of gnarly right now, that's okay. What I'm going to do is actually use a function of director to smooth those out. So now I'm going to basically toggle edit mode. I'm turning off edit mode. Now you can see if I click, rather than actually drawing in the fields, I'm selecting. So I'm going to go up here to our red. I'm going to click and drag from the beginning of my kind of ramp up to the top here to the middle part. I'm just going to right click and I'm going to hit transition. And it's just going to smooth that out for me. So it's a nice gradual climb. I'll go ahead and do that to the other end as well. Right click, hit transition. And then I'll do it to these. And this is just going to give me nice smooth transitions between the different lights on the fixture. Let's go ahead and go back and we can preview that. Just hitting the button here to go back to start and hit play. So you should see our red light start to come on. As the green starts to pick up, you're going to see that sort of start to change to a more yellow. And then as the red fades away, you're going to get more and more of just the green. And then once this starts to fade down, you're going to start to get more of the blue mixing in, sort of an aqua greenish blue. Then as the green fades away, just to a nice rich dark blue. And then that's just going to fade down to nothing over time. So you see it's just sort of dimming now, fading down to off at the end of the show. And there it is. So if we want to adjust any of that, we can. You know, I was thinking maybe this red light here should come on a little earlier. So let's go ahead and go back to editing mode. Let's just do a line like that. We'll get it to like right about here. So it starts on when the show starts, and then it'll kind of fade to off. Then we just toggle edit mode back off, select this, right click, and transition. So now when we go back to the start, the red light will actually be on, but just kind of dim. Once we're done doing our programming, and I think this looks pretty good for now, we can always go back and tweak things and change it up. I'm going to just save the show. It's always a good idea to save it. This is just saved on a local folder here in case we need to go back. And then I'm going to export the show to the controller itself. So I'm going to go here and hit export. I'm going to use the director connect and hit export here. And it's going to send the show to the BooBox Flex. Now that's done. So now we can actually disconnect the director connect from the Flex. If we now hit play on the Flex, it's going to play back our show. So I'm going to shut down the lights, I'm going to hit play, and we'll watch our entire show. All right, and that is it. So that is a view of how we programmed our animatronic servo-driven violin-playing skeleton. We used a BooBox Flex controller with DMX. We used a ServoDMX. We used a Director Connect, and we used a DMX Lite. And with all that stuff together, using the Director program, we were able to create a dynamic program that was synced to audio and included lighting effects. If you have any questions about anything you saw in this video, you can always feel free to leave a comment on the video or send us an email at sales@freightprops.com. I want to thank you so much for watching, and if you learned anything cool from this video, just let me know. I'd love to see any projects that you come up with using the techniques or any of the tips or tricks that you saw watching any of our videos. Thanks again. We'll see you next time.